you have a presentation as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, try and just, if you can keep it to 5 to 6 minutes. Yeah, I think Siddharth, I'll also quickly introduce you. He has been working for quite some years on decentralized models, especially when the data question on solid waste to the informal sector was quite lagging behind. This is at the right time that you entered with your agency, Kobadi Connect. So thanks for being on the panel, and over to you, Siddharth.
Thank you, Rashna. Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Hi everyone, my name is Siddharth Hande. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Kobadi Connect. We're a for-profit social enterprise. I'm a data scientist by training. So Kobadi Connect was really started on the back of mapping the informal recycling supply chain in my hometown of Chennai. So now we offer services that help integrate this informal recycling supply chain into the formal system. So just wanted to share a little bit on this. And also, I guess the addition into this panel is, what is the informal sector doing as in the circular economy? What is their role now, and what could it be in the future? I'd like to add that into this equation because honestly, not just in India, in Indian cities and towns, but also very much in the global south, they are really on the front lines of the question of collection of dry waste and recyclable material. So the first starting point for me, I just want to kind of discuss is that in the global south, the question of municipal waste collection is kind of in crisis. There are a few factors on this because most of our waste is being generated by small and medium waste generators in the city. There's a World Bank study that says for effective waste management or waste collection in the global south, a municipality can should spend anywhere between 20 to 50% of their budget. So that just highlights this crisis that most of the waste that gets collected in our cities and towns is being sent to the landfill, and even that is too expensive. So one of the big issues here is how do you collect segregated material from small, in locations where there's a lot of small amounts of waste, but at scale, at an ecosystem level, it aggregates to the most. Chennai is a great example where 70% of our waste is actually coming from households, apartments, things like that. And so when we look at specific material streams, let's say plastic, you take this question of a lot of plastic entering our oceans, and we know it's from the global south. Really, it's pointing at our waste collection system being in crisis. So really, plastic is one of the material fractions that's being mismanaged, hence finding its way into our waterways and landfills. So for us, the starting point and our belief really is that this is an amazing opportunity to integrate this informal recycling supply chain. Because in this gap where the formal system, which is focusing on waste collection to the landfill, there's still so much valuable material. So ever since the 60s and 70s, on the back of paper and metal, you've had these stakeholders like waste pickers, Kailan Kades, these small scrap shops, Kabadiwalas they call lapaks actually in Indonesia. Actually, most places in the global south have a name for them. We will call them something specific, they mean something to us, and we know we can go and sell. So ever since the 60s, there's this supply chain that has emerged that's actually scavenging for this material, this valuable stuff that we throw away. Informality, I just want to also point out, is not a peripheral issue. It's not just this aesthetic or this important social question that we integrate, people working in the informal sector, but they are actually critical to our supply chains and businesses. There's an ILO study which says that more than 2 billion people are working in the informal sector, so they don't have access to health and safety, they don't have access to standard protocols that allow for dignified work. And recycling system is a typical case. It's a typical ecosystem supply chain where you see a lot of informal work. So what we knew, and again, I always had this idea of I wanted to map every scrap shop and help articulate with an evidence-based approach. What were they collecting? How are they set up in the supply chain? How is it that so much material is actually being collected in the global south? And what we started off with was some key points. We knew that there was the waste picker. We all know this. There's a very key stakeholder who's going in scavenging, collecting. There's a study that says there's about 1.5 million waste pickers across India. There's another statistic that said that they were collecting something like 20% of the city's recyclable waste. That already is a fascinating question because it's a large amount of material. When you look at, let's say, a formal contractor working with the municipality to manage 20% of their recycled waste, that's a multi-crore project. There's also studies that show that for every ton the informal sector collects, it's actually saving the municipality $328, about 25,000 rupees. And also the other thing we knew was waste pickers make very little money for what they do. So in 2017, what I realized was that there was this big gap in the literature of who else was there. Apart from the waste picker, who else was there who was critical as a stakeholder in the informal supply chain? And my goal was, my lived experience also was, you walk the street, there's a Kailan Kada. In Delhi, they're called Kapadi Wala. So I wanted to map every single one of these shops and really understand how this material was moving ultimately to, was it a formal processing system? Was it an informal processing system? Again, my beginning point with waste was organizing cleanups in our beach, Besnagar Beach, and a lot of the beaches down south. And we realized that we were just collecting this material and it was going to our landfills, Palikarna and Puringur. We saw also waste pickers come in, very industriously pick up certain materials, and this was really my starting point with waste management. And what we really found in the study over in 2017 was that apart from the waste picker, there was also what we called a level 1 aggregator and a level 2 aggregator. At least that's how we like to call it. So imagine the case that what we discovered, that there was waste pickers scavenging the street. They were then going to the small Kailan Karais, selling their material. These scrap shops were material agnostic. So they buy paper, plastic, glass, metal. We've worked with them successfully to collect low-value plastic. We've worked with them successfully to collect used cooking oil, for example. And these kinds, they're really focused on the collection part of it, and they're extremely good at what they do. Then, depending on the type of material, they were sending it to these informal material recovery facilities. And again, here it's a key industrial pre-process where the big recyclers require material to come in bales or a particular pre-process that they were essentially supporting. And when you look at the map, and this is when I knew that we had something, when I show you the map of level 1 aggregators in the city, I mean, look at the number of shops that are there for us. Like, I could very easily be showing you a map of ATMs in the city or vegetable shops. So you can really see how over time they've come up to actually provide a core circular economy service for our cities. And then when you look at the level 2s, they're much more clustered. So you have a paper cluster, you have a metal cluster, you have a plastic cluster. And then materials are going long distances, so they kind of set up in these industrial areas, next to highways, things like that. In Chennai, we found that they were collecting, so Chennai generates about 542,000 recyclable waste every year. They were already collecting 130,000 tons, 24%. A lot of paper, a lot of plastic, a lot of glass, a lot of metal. And in fact, and this is a study we did with GIZ, with the Tamil Nadu government, was when we looked at the wards surrounding the Adyar and Coombe River, our two major rivers, and we overlaid the scrap shops and looked at the volumes of plastics that they were collecting, you can actually see how much they're collecting. And we built this hypothesis that if you actually bring in large formal processors with stable prices, with clear incentives for this supply chain, there is a crazy collection system that generates. So look at PET, for example, in both the clusters. It's almost like in the wards across the Coombe River, there's 110 tons of PET being generated, close to 100%, 98 tons is being collected. In the wards across the Adyar River, there's actually a surplus. From what is generated in the area, there's actually 188 tons that's being collected. And this is because India has a very strong PET to textile market. So PET is in high demand, and the textile is part of a global commodity. And so we always advocate with PP, with PE, with low-value plastics, integrating the supply chain in the right way can drive incredible collection. Just a couple of points. What we focus on as a social enterprise, we're really focused on the rapid integration holistically of the supply chain. So we undertake projects for large recyclers, brands looking for offtake agreements, but also with research, policy, and government institutions that all support the mandate of this equitable integration of this supply chain. And yes, our really, maybe just the last couple of points, I think What we propose first in let's say, a theory of change, first you have to map them. You need to know who they are, what materials are being created. It's really imperative that we create these factual baselines of what exists already before we go in and intervene. On top of that, we realize waste pickers, small scrap shops, they actually not integrated well with social packages. For example, we have this project where we're working with waste pickers in Chennai, integrating them into the Chief Minister's health insurance scheme. The third is around digitalized procurement, so traceability as a key point, proving to the private sector that you can work with this supply chain. And the fourth, what we hope we can get to, is dignified collection, where a scrap shop and the waste pickers are actually organizing collection last mile on our behalf, going directly to the homes instead of scavenging. And we're really tailored to the global south. We find what we learn in India is applicable in Sri Lanka. We have a project there. It's applicable in Hong Kong. We have a project there as well. So it's really this global south question, I think, that we're learning, and really how this supply chain is a key part of the circular economy, and they need to be rendered visible. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Siddharth. And if you look at the entire discussion that we have had, if I may also request Ms. Jyotsna to present our session chair with a token of our appreciation. This booklet also showcases the TNFI journey, highlighting the problem statement and the official assembly announcement. A very special thanks to our dignitaries on stage.